Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I'm your host, Michael Voss, the political dragon, here in New York, in the Bronx. And it's January 7th at approximately 2 in the afternoon. I have a cold, so if my voice sounds off, I apologize for that. I'm going to try and make it through this as best I can, because I think there's some interesting news that is going on right now. We need to talk about it. Now, before I get started, and talking about Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and censorship and MAGA. Before I get there, I do want to mention if this is the first time you're seeing our channel, I want to welcome you and I thank you for being part of our audience. I want you to know we do long-form political commentary. And, of course, every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you all around the world to hear your voices. Only when I'm sick is the only time I won't be doing that. And that's rare. But I want you to join us every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to have a conversation where free speech is the key, because we believe in that. It's something that's not just an amendment in America. It's something that's true for everyone in the world. So we hope you'll join us this Sunday as well. Now, the real thing that we want to talk about or the main thing we want to talk about here today, as best as I can, is about Mark Zuckerberg. The news is out there right now. Mark Zuckerberg made his announcements today. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone based on what he said in 2023, the realities we have learned about the Biden-Harris administration and what it means about the Obama-Biden administration. But I'll explain all of that in just a moment. But I don't think that Mark Zuckerberg is going MAGA, nor is Facebook. They're not jumping on the Trump train. That's the lie that is being said by the mainstream news media and other social media giants to grab your attention, to put fear into the minds of those on the left to make them obey. And let me explain what I mean. Now, you'll see the fear-mongering is in full effect right now. CNN, Mark Zuckerberg's MAGA makeover. He has a MAGA makeover. The Daily Beast, which is extremely far left, given. Zuckerberg turns Facebook full MAGA. Oh my God. Market Watch, Meta goes MAGA. What is this? Inc. Meta goes MAGA. Facebook adopts Elon Musk style fact checking. Oh my God. That's so terrifying. I mean, if you're on the left, you've been told repeatedly, you've been trained to believe that making America great is an evil thing, that this is somehow a negative for the nation, that it's anti-freedom to make America great or have an America first principle. You've been taught this by Barack Obama. You've been taught this by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and in all of the colleges across this nation, like Harvard and Columbia. They've been saying America is evil. White people are evil. Equity is absolutely necessary. So anything that makes America great, well, that must be a bad thing. So if you're on the left, you're terrified right now. You're looking at social media going, oh my God, it's X and now it's Facebook. This is going horribly, horribly wrong. As opposed to, this is an expression of free speech. And what's not being talked about is, so you had censorship in its place. That Meta, Facebook, like Twitter, now X, were surrounded and encapsulated by suppression of free speech, by censorship. Essentially, they were helping to create a dictatorship in America. No one really talks about it in those terms. They want to change the way that you think about this so you don't realize the consequences that you've been living with for quite some time. But we do remember the consequences, and we haven't forgotten. So even though you're starting to see various articles come out and the left-leaning media wants to focus on the fact checkers, it's about the fact checkers. There's no more fact checkers. There's no more facts. The facts are gone. That's hardly the truth. That's not even close to the truth. And we'll go with Mark Zuckerberg's own words on this in a little bit. But you're not losing fact checkers. You're not losing the facts. You're losing feelings and political ambition. Now, this isn't new. We talked about this, I talked about this back in 2013 when I was running for Congress. And here's an article from that time on my old website. And you can see we were talking about the IRS attacking conservatives. We were talking about the Department of Justice as it was going after news media that were looking to reveal the truth, about investigations and questions into what happened in Benghazi. There was a lot of attempts to silence people online, to limit and reduce and suppress free speech. That censorship has been around, or the growth of censorship online has been around since the Obama administration, because we were not allowed to ask the question, what are you transforming America into? Obama said, we're going to make America about hope, and we're going to change, we're going to transform. But he never finished the sentence. He never said, transform into what? Change what? He never answered this. He left it open-ended, and now we can kind of see where he was going based on what we've seen from the colleges, institutions, from the Biden-Harris administration and their actions. We see the answer: to become more progressive, to adopt more progressive and more authoritarian actions. Let me make my point a little more clear. It was in April of 2018 that Mark Zuckerberg had yet another meeting with Congress. And in this one particular one, April 10th of 2018, according to C-SPAN, Mr. Zuckerberg was talking about adding in tools to prevent fake news, foreign interference, and hate speech. He was using AI and algorithms from the AIs to identify keywords that they didn't like, keywords that the left felt were upsetting in some way. And so because these were microaggressions, because the left felt bad about having these conversations, well, then you would be targeted. You were isolated. You were put on the naughty list of the internet, and your voice would be suppressed. Initially, they would just eliminate your voice, blocking you completely, deleting your post. As that got a lot more attention, they finally decided, well, that's too much attention. Everyone's paying attention. Like when Jack Dorsey, the former owner and CEO of Twitter, had to appear before Congress and had to admit that the algorithms were directly targeting conservatives and Republicans and voices that weren't regurgitating the approved messaging. This isn't new news. We knew this was happening, that the left had massive control over the internet, especially because the Obama-Biden administration was looking to isolate and to restrict people from being able to speak about anything they didn't like. It's not my opinion. We know for a fact, BBC, C-SPAN, this has been reported. They were targeting you and the way you speak and the way you think. In fact, it was back in 2018, after my congressional run, that we were still talking about the censorship on Facebook, on YouTube, on many social media platforms, and how they were trying to silence people, deleting content and hiding it, suppressing it from being shared by the public. Not that people had to agree, not that there couldn't be discussion, but just because the content may have been unapproved. It was not something that was being said by CNN or MSNBC, ABC, the New York Times. If it wasn't being said by the left, then they had deemed it shouldn't be said by anyone. Again, this is something that was pushed since the Obama-Biden administration, and the Democrats in their control kept pushing that message, and the colleges kept training students with that mindset, with the critical race theory and intersectionality were being pushed in all the colleges constantly, saying, no, you only get to say what everyone else approves, what the left approves. Now, we know that even early on, many people identified that AI would not be the answer. In fact, AI would only reveal more of the bias that is already inherent. Something that was very clearly understood in the programming and computer sciences is that the bias of the programmer becomes the program itself. And we've seen this now with ChatGPT and many of the AIs out there. We've seen how whatever left-leaning bias is being put into them is being spit out in their results over and over again. But we knew this back in 2018. This wasn't a surprise. And we knew that Meta, Facebook, Twitter, all the social media giants, Google and YouTube, were targeting people based on keywords, and those keywords were only conservative terms, only things that the left didn't like and might affect elections going forward. Now, throughout that time frame, all the way, let's move even forward, because we then went into the lockdowns in 2020. And we saw that the next level of suppression came out with fact-checking that we heard from the Biden-Harris administration and the Democrats in control, that we had to fact-check everyone, that misinformation and disinformation were the most dangerous things to America, as well as climate change, as well as MAGA, basically anything that didn't help support and keep Democrats elected was dangerous to the public. And so we had to have fact checkers. And those fact checkers had to make sure that everything you said was approved, that it was a message that came from the left that supported the left. Now, you say, Mike, but you're biased about this. You have a bias built in. Well, here's Mark Zuckerberg. This is his words earlier today. Don't believe me. Listen to Mark Zuckerberg directly.
The problem is that the filters make mistakes, and they take down a lot of content that they shouldn't. So by dialing them back, we're going to dramatically reduce the amount of censorship on our platforms.
Stop right there. So he is admitting, Mark Zuckerberg today is admitting, there is censorship on Facebook, that the AIs that are being used, the systems that they put in place to fact check you and me, they actually promote censorship. They silence people. They punish people for having free speech, for saying, I don't agree, or I have a question and I want an answer. Like, who's running the government? Joe Biden isn't mentally fit. So who's in charge? Why have they not executed the 25th Amendment? Oh, these are problem questions. We shouldn't be asking those questions. We shouldn't have this discussion because that's misinformation. And therefore, the people asking it have to be punished, like this channel. So Mark Zuckerberg is admitting that he has been complicit in that Facebook has been actively doing that, punishing you to create censorship, that they did actively censor you. It's the only way to take that away. So it's not about the fact checking, it's about censorship, because it was never fact checking, it was only censorship.
We're also going to tune our content filters to require much higher confidence before taking down content.
So they have it set. They set the bar so low that they knew they were getting a huge net. They knew they were getting people who weren't violating the terms of Facebook, but because they had such a huge net out there to corral people into a singular way of thinking, otherwise known as fortifying the elections in 2020 and 2022 and an attempt in 2024, by trying to fortify people, by limiting what they can say, well, that is authoritarian. And he's admitting it right here. So Facebook was throwing out a big net that they knew would get people in trouble, that they would be punishing people for daring to say things that weren't approved. And they knew they were getting people who weren't doing anything offensive or bad. They just weren't towing the line. They weren't politically partisan, or at least politically partisan the way that the leadership wanted. And so he was working with them. Now he's not. Let's see what else he will say.
The reality is that this is a trade-off. It means we're going to catch less bad stuff.
Bad stuff for whom? What bad stuff? He already admitted the algorithm didn't work. The fact checkers were biased. In this conversation, he already says the fact checkers were massively politically biased. So he's saying, we're not going to catch the bad stuff. You mean for the political partisan bias that was out there? What they consider bad stuff, like asking questions about who's in charge of our government, asking questions like, what are you transforming America into? Those bad questions.
But we'll also reduce the number of innocent people's posts and accounts that we accidentally take down.
So he admits Facebook, Meta, has been punishing innocent people for saying things they didn't like. That free speech didn't exist on Facebook. There were people who were saying that this is true. I showed you. We've been talking about it since 2013, actually even before then. But we were punished and suppressed for saying the truth, much like what we saw with the Biden laptop. That was suppressed for 2 years, and then we found out it was true. We were told that Russia, the Russia collusion lie. 3 years we were told every night by Rachel Maddow that, that this was real. And then 3 investigations later, including one by Democrats, 35 million tax dollars later, it's not true at all. You were lied to. And even now, we see that with Joe Biden. His White House staff have now publicly admitted, that Joe Biden has not been mentally fit even on the day, January 2021, when he became president. Even then, he was not mentally fit to be president, and his schedule had to be modified and engineered so that other people wouldn't notice he was incapable of doing the job. We know that truth now, but that truth was suppressed. The White House knew it. Some of the news media knew it. Some of the social media giants knew this and restricted you from being able to say it, to ask about it, or to investigate it. That is authoritarian. And now we have the proof, yet again. But let's see what else.
Fourth, we're bringing back civic content. For a while, the community asked to see less politics because it was making people stressed.
Or was it that the censors and the fact checkers, the misinformation people, they didn't want the public to talk about politics. They wanted people to just obey, to not question whatever they saw in the news. It wasn't a thing about the public. Yeah, if you were stressed, you scrolled past that post. You went on to the next post, or you blocked that individual. You always had the tools to change the channel. You've always had those tools, and you've always been able to do that. It's only when you weren't doing it enough to help Democrats win elections, that's when they decided, well, it's misinformation, it's disinformation. The government has to control all information, and they did it with the social media giants. And I find this kind of funny in a way, and not a ha-ha kind of aspect, but Mark Zuckerberg is doing exactly what he was slamming China for. Now, if we remember back in 2019, Mark Zuckerberg was saying, oh, well, this is authoritarian, that China won't let the public, the Chinese public, or anyone in the world to get onto TikTok and speak about what they want to say. He was attacking them, and he absolutely was upset about the Hong Kong protests, which we spoke about at the time. But he was saying, oh, well, what, you can't deny people from having a conversation. And yet he has been doing so for a decade. And then Mark Zuckerberg started to see an opportunity. It was in 2022. Remember, August 2022, before the midterm elections, that Mark Zuckerberg went on to Joe Rogan's show and admitted that the FBI were the reason. We suddenly found out in 2022 that the Hunter Biden laptop, it was real. That everything in it was true. That Hunter Biden violated multiple laws. And there were even more things, more allegations, and more questions that could have been asked. At the time, over 400 potential charges could have been made by the FBI, but they didn't because Joe Biden was president and Hunter Biden was protected, which now we see he has received the ultimate protection of a pardon for anything and everything over a decade, 11 years time period. So there was a problem, but it was in 2022 that Mark Zuckerberg came out and told the public the truth, that it was the White House, it was the Democrat White House that was enforcing censorship and suppression of your voice, and that Mark Zuckerberg, the billionaire, the super powerful individual who was left-leaning, a Democrat, he obeyed. And when he obeyed the government, when he obeyed the attempt at authoritarianism by the Biden-Harris administration, guess what? You had to obey. You were forced to obey. He helped increase the amount of authoritarianism in America. Mark Zuckerberg was looking for a way out. He knew he was wrong. And he knew, just like with the Hunter laptop, he was going to be found out, that he lied to the American people and Congress in 2018, in 2019, 2020, 2021. Every time he appeared before Congress and said that that Facebook was not censoring the public, he knew the truth was going to come out because it came out about the Biden laptop. Therefore, the truth was going to come out about him. Same thing with the IRS. Same thing with the DOJ investigating reporters. The truth was coming out. He was going to get caught. And that means he perjured himself in front of Congress. That's a crime. He can go to jail. And his company, of course, could be fined because they denied American citizens their First Amendment rights. He knew that. So to get ahead of that story, he started saying, it's not my fault. The White House made me do it. The White House and Democrats in charge of government. It's the government that forced me, under the terms of misinformation and disinformation, that I had to make everyone on the social media, they had to obey. Otherwise, he would be punished, that his company would be punished. Well, he's not much of a hero, is he? Sounds kind of selfish. He wanted to protect himself. He wanted to protect his company and his profits, his money. He was protecting them by obeying the acts of censorship and authoritarianism that were coming from the Democratic government, whether it be the Obama-Biden administration or the Biden-Harris administration. Doesn't make a difference. He was obeying them to protect his company and his money and himself. But that's not the way the mainstream wanted you to think about it. In fact, they didn't want you to think about it at all. Remember, we saw this in 2024, last year before the election. Zuckerberg says the White House pressured Facebook to censor some people during the pandemic. Yeah, a lot of them. That's also with the fact checkers. They were censoring you, that they actually suppressed you. Mind you, he went to Congress at that same time and said there is no censorship, no such thing, that they would never do that. And now we know the truth. He did. He did it on purpose, and it was selfish. He was protecting his company. He was protecting his profits. He was protecting himself. Didn't care about you. And I assume that if it weren't for Donald Trump being in office, if it weren't Trump for MAGA and an America First reinforcement of the Constitution and the amendments, he may never have ever admitted this. By the way, he's not the only one. We're seeing the same thing with Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos, who said the Washington Post isn't going to be left-centered. that they weren't going to be far left. In the 2024 election, the outrage amongst the news media and those who read the Washington Post was that he didn't automatically endorse the Democrat. Oh my, what a shocking thing. He doesn't have to. It isn't a requirement of any news agency to endorse any candidate for any office. But he dared to not. Jeff Bezos, a dyed-in-the-wool leftist, decided not to push for Democrats and progressives. How dare he? And there was massive outrage on that. This happened in October, after Joe Biden, who was the duly voted on nominee for the Democrats, was kicked out by the Democratic elites. And Kamala Harris was propped up in his place without a single vote by the Democrat rank and file. The public didn't have a choice. And he decided not to support that very authoritarian action by the Democratic National Committee. And he was demonized for that. That kind of makes me think, so now that we are seeing more and more of Americans and people around the world who are starting to go more and more back to free speech, the answer has been from those who are on the left, well, they'll go to blue sky and they will censor even more. That people who have a different opinion than whatever exists in blue sky, well, they don't exist. They'll get kicked out. They'll be censored. In fact, they will be told, as we see here, people will say that they should have been aborted, that some people will say step into traffic, that you daring to not have the approved ideology of blue sky means you're to be suppressed and punished. So let me bring this all together a little bit. What we have seen today is a positive, that we are seeing social media is returning to what social media used to be, back in about 2010, 2009, more free, more open, more conversations, more discourse and debate. That's a good thing. Whether you agree with any particular view or not is up to you. It's not up to the government. It's not up to the social media giants. And you always have the opportunity and the ability to not be involved in any conversation you don't want to be. If you don't like someone's review of a movie, if you don't like their review of a TV show, if you don't like their politics, you don't have to listen to it. You're not required to. But that's what we were being fed under the Obama-Biden administration. That's what we were being fed under the Biden-Harris administration. We were being told, you have to obey. You have to agree. That's not freedom. That's authoritarianism. That's dictatorship. You have no voice, no rights. You're not a human being in that system. And misinformation, saying that, any other opinion is misinformation. It's disinformation. No, it's discourse. It's a discussion. It's not disinformation. Mark Zuckerberg is not a hero for what he has done today. Mark Zuckerberg is he's doing CYA. He's covering his ass because he was never a hero. He was complicit and went full hog in obeying a government that he knew was violating the First Amendment, in a government that he knew was being authoritarian and unfairly punishing innocent American citizens. And he lied to everyone's face and said, it isn't happening, when he knew, 1,000% knew and complied and knew he was in fact suppressing people. He's not a hero. He's not MAGA. He's not any kind of right-wing anything. The rest of the media is going to tell you this is all about fact-checking. And no one's going to fact-check things anymore. You can fact-check things. You have a cell phone. You have the Library of Alexandria in your pocket. You can fact-check anything you want, anytime that you want. And you can ignore anything that you want, anytime that you want. The power has always been with you. Never should it be in the hands of the government. Because when it's in the hands of a government, any government, it will be corrupt. And that corruption will only increase over time. That's our point of view. We've always had that point of view. Doesn't matter if you're left, right, or anything else. It's on you, not the government. Because the government is biased. The government, like fact checkers, have a political agenda. At least that's the way that I see it. And that's based on the evidence and the things we have seen all the way over time, in the last decade at least, as we have shown you. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't. Well, we'll include the links of everything that we have looked at so that you can see it for yourself. And you can come to your own decision. Because you are an individual, because you do have agency, because the government doesn't get to make that decision for you. Now, if you found this interesting and informative, I thank you, and I hope that you'll give us a like, maybe you'll subscribe, or join us on Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Whatever you choose, I thank you for having given us some of your time today. I'm sorry if my voice still sounds bad because, again, I have a cold. But I look forward to seeing you all again very, very soon. Thank you so much for tuning in to No Soundbites Allowed today. I'm the political dragon, Michael Voss. On this podcast, we don't settle for soundbites. We dive deeper, challenge assumptions, and have the conversations that matter. If you liked today's show, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us your comments. Follow me on the major social media platforms like X, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, and more to stay updated on upcoming episodes and join the conversation live on our next live stream. We love hearing from you and we value every perspective. We stream live, responding to your chats and calls starting at 2:30 p.m. every Sunday. Stay informed, stay engaged, and as always, don't settle for the sound bites.